Hello friends, this is Joseph, and today I'll be showing my zombie tribal deck with the partner commanders of Thrasios Triton Hero and Ravos Soul Tender. The reason I chose these two is originally because the deck was going to be Esper. I was going to run Silas Wren with Ravos, and Silas Wren has a lot of hoops to jump through before he actually generates value. First, you have to cast him. He has to survive around the table without dying. Then he has to connect for combat damage. Then you have to have an artifact in your graveyard to cast. And that artifact needs to be good enough that you actually want to cast it. So there's like 5 or 6 hoops for Silas Wren to jump through, and it just seemed a little clunky and not very good. So I decided to go 4 colors instead of 3. This deck was originally inspired by the Commander's Brew podcast. Sean and Andy created this awesome Esper budget deck, and I took a lot of those ideas. I looked at the new Amonkhet spoilers and now Hour of Devastation spoilers, and there's a lot of cool cards coming out or have come out recently. So I wanted access to white for playing cards like Wayward Servant and some of the Reanimator spells. Furthermore, I wanted access to green because I like to ramp and play bigger spells and just have more flexibility. So this deck was supposed to be Esper, now it's redless. I took apart my Atraxa deck earlier in the year to build a 5-color Planeswalker deck. So I had the entire mana base from my Atraxa Super Friends deck to play around with, and it just worked perfectly in these colors. So everything fell into place for a 4-color zombie tribal deck. I hope you enjoy this video, and leave comments in the comment section below. I would love to hear back from you. So as you've seen with Ravos Soul Tender, he anthems the team and makes all the zombies stronger. And I really wanted to elaborate more on this idea by running a lot of the Anthem zombie effects that are in these particular colors. Death Baron is one that I don't currently own, so if you have it, I would highly recommend it putting in the deck list. But each one of these zombies does different things. Lord the Accursed can make my zombies have menace, a little harder to block. Cemetery Reaper, Liliana's Mastery both can produce creature tokens. Marshall's Anthem and Lord of the Undead can return creatures from the graveyard to my hand or reanimate things. And then there's even cards like Miari's Wake or Undead Warchief that ramp me in some way. And a major weakness I've seen with zombies is typically not having trample and not having flying. So to compensate for the trample part, I decided to run Thunderhoof Baloth so that I can have his lieutenant ability giving all my creatures +2/+2 in trample. It's really easy to have at least one of my 2 commanders out at any given point in the game, because Thrasios is 2 CMC and Ravos is 5, stack nicely because they're both an odd and even casting cost commander, which I think is very important for choosing partner commanders so that you can get the maximum benefit from them. But anyways, these are the Anthem effects, and yeah, I just want to have a lot of zombies and get them really big. Because Ravos Soul Tender at the beginning of my upkeep can bring back creatures from the graveyard to my hand, I wanted to focus a lot of my card draw on being more looting effects or interacting with the graveyard in some way. So I decided to run Fauna Shaman because I can discard particular creatures from my hand, put in my graveyard, search for whatever creature I need at the given time, and then reanimate the other card from the graveyard, or Ravos can bring it back into my hand. So it gives me a lot of virtual card advantage over the course of the game, because it's kind of like it's drawing me 2 cards every time I use Fauna Shaman's ability. Lifecrafter's Bestiary, because I'm running a lot of creatures, I think this has the potential of just drawing me lots of cards. I like the ability to scry every upkeep too, as to kind of improve the quality of my card draw. Monastery Siege lets me, if I choose cons, draw an additional card and then discard a card every turn. Some zombies I actually want in my graveyard for particular combos and synergies. Heuristic Study, Phyrexian Arena, Factor Fiction are all just kind of staple cards that I like running. Sidisi is perfect in this deck because he's a zombie. He fits really thematically for the deck. And Forgotten Creation has the ability to like discard your entire hand on your upkeep and then draw a new hand of cards. So if you have 5 or 6 cards maybe in your hand, you just don't really need them, or you would prefer seeing them in the graveyard, that's a pretty useful ability. So I really like this set of cards. I typically like running 10 to 12 ramp and 10 or so card draw spells every deck that I build. Because Thrasios gives me the scry ability and draws me cards and ramps me, I'm putting a little less emphasis on the ramp and the card draw for this particular deck. So this is my ramp package. I chose to mostly run 2 casting cost spells because a lot of the zombies are 3, 4, and 5 casting cost. And that's another big reason why Thrasios is very vital to the deck as being a 2 casting cost commander, because he enables consistent ramping and color fixing in the early part of the game. So Nature's Lore and Farseek are very important to search out whatever particular color you need. I'm running a lot of shock lands, the new bicycle lands, and the Zendikar battle lands that have 2 different basic land types included on them. In a 4-color deck, I like to run 39, 40 lands, same with 5-color decks. Just makes it a little bit more consistent. So Burgeoning is very good for that reason. I typically will have 4 lands in my opening hand, and if I'm playing with 3 other opponents, and I can play Burgeoning on turn 1, by the time it gets back around to me on the table, I've already have 3 or 4 lands out, and that's a really big source of advantage over my opponents. And also, I preferred some creature-oriented ramp spells like Quarreling Oracle because I am running a sub-theme of some Reanimator spells, and there's a good chance that I'll be able to use Quarreling Oracle a few times throughout the game. Same thing with Life from the Loam. Life from the Loam can dredge, it can fuel my graveyard to get me reanimate targets, and with the 9 fetch lands that I'm running, this is a good way to reuse some of the fetch lands if, for whatever reason, I don't have the color fixing that I need, so it really helps smooth out the deck. Sky Shroud Claim can search for 2 forests, very similar to Farseek in Nature's Lore. Now for a quick look at the reanimation sort of spells I'm running Eternal Witness, Living Death, Sun Titan, Zombie Apocalypse, and Rise from the Dark Realms. I already showed you Martial Anthem. Martial's Anthem can be kicked to reanimate creatures, so I kind of have a total of 6 of these sort of effects. 6 is a nice number to have a pretty consistent game where I'll at least see 1 of these in the course of a game. Zombie Apocalypse doubles back as a board wipe, same with Living Death, because it can, like, Zombie Apocalypse returns all the zombies back to the battlefield, but it destroys all humans. So as I mentioned before with not choosing Silas Wren for the various reasons, another big reason not to run Silas Wren is because he's a human. And with Ravos being a human and Silas Wren being a human, you're killing both your commanders every time. Thrasios is not a human and therefore will stick around on the battlefield even if you play cards like Zombie Apocalypse. So that's kind of a choice that I made for the commander pairing. Eternal Witness combined with Sun Titan is very useful to get back multiple cards. It's a way of getting some of your spot removal and other such cards back onto the battlefield, like your Rhystic Study or Phyrexian Arena, whatever you need at any given point. And Rise from the Dark Realms to return all creatures from all graveyards to the battlefield under your control. One weakness to this deck, though, is with not having access to red, you do not have that many haste enablers. So haste is kind of a really challenging part of the deck. I love Rise from the Dark Realms because with a haste enabler, because you can then take everything and just swing an attack immediately after. But in this particular deck list, sometimes you cast Rise from the Dark Realms, you reanimate the graveyard, and you have to hope you survive a full turn before you get that reaping benefit of attacking. I have one way of getting haste for the team, but it's kind of tricky, and I'll explain that in a bit. So the haste enabler that I'm kind of incorporating in the deck that's pretty tricky to run is Dredge Mangler with Odric. Odric can give all your creatures haste because Dredge Mangler has haste. Now this is a really janky way of giving your team haste if these are both in your graveyard and you cast a mass reanimation spell like Rise of the Dark Realms. But often you won't have either one of these in your graveyard and you won't necessarily get haste to the whole team. So this is a significant weakness to the deck, is not having that immediate punch and abilities to swing in right away when you get lots of zombie tokens or a big horde of zombies attacking. They usually have to survive a full turn before you're going to see the benefits to it. And that enables your opponent to use politics or play a board wipe or various things and really hinder this deck. So I would say that's a big weakness to the deck, is not having a way of granting haste to the team. So these are some of the utility zombies that I'm running in the deck. These are the ones that have different keywords or such that actually work well with Aldrich. Like, a lot of these you'll notice have flying. That's a way of getting your whole team flying with Aldrich. I like Mirror Identity because he can make all of your zombie tokens really big. I'll show some of those cards soon. Wayward Servant is a big reason for why I chose to include white in this deck list. Because if I play Army of the Damned, it'll bring in 13 zombies and I can hit all my opponents for 13 damage immediately. And that's often enough damage to drastically swing the game, including the life that you gain from it. Jared, Golgari Leechlord, is really good with Goweltree because often you're able to cast Goweltree for only 1 mana, and then you can sacrifice it, do 10 damage to a whole bunch of players, and try to do that a few times in a turn. That's a potential way of winning the game. Avenge Stitchwing and Giroff's Masterpiece have these abilities that you can discard cards to return them to the battlefield. And ideally you want to discard cards like other zombies that you can reanimate. So this is kind of a way of discarding and reanimating and creating a bit of that engine. Vizier of Many Faces is a new one that I added that I'm super excited about and seeing great results with. It's not a zombie in and of itself, but it can become a copy of any of your creatures. So my most recent game, I copied Undead War Chief, which gave +2/+1 to all my zombies. And then when I had 2 copies of that, my zombies got really big really quickly and were able to trample in for quite a bit of damage. And if she ever dies, you can embalm her, and then she comes back as an actual zombie. So she's very versatile. You can copy the biggest threat on your opponent's side of the field, or you can just copy one of your zombie lords and make your team stronger. Thassa just makes creatures unblockable, and the ability to scry kind of filters your card draw and makes it a little better. And Grey Merchant is just really good because he can just hit your opponents for a lot of damage out of nowhere if you have a lot of black permanents on the field and a high amount of black devotion, and then you gain that life. So it's a little bit of life gain, a little bit of burning your opponent away. And that's a good way to get around some of those ghostly prison sort of decks or propaganda decks where you aren't necessarily able to attack into them. You have some of these cards that can kind of get around that. One very unique zombie too in this list is the Ruinator, the one right over here. At first you read it and you think, oh, I have to exile 3 creatures from my graveyard? That's terrible, I don't want to do that. Well, as you've seen with Sun Titan and Zombie Apocalypse, they actually bring target permanent or put zombies onto the battlefield, so you don't actually have to cast him if he's in your graveyard. If you can reanimate him some other way, often he's coming into the battlefield for free as a 5/6 flyer that you do not have to cast. So that's very important to note. If you can get Sun Titan out and bring back Ruinator, that's the ultimate plan for just getting a really powerful flying zombie. And I showed you 10 Anthem effects. If you have even a couple of them out there, he's going to be a huge creature. He might even be able to just fly over an Avacyn Angel of Hope or some big threat because he's going to be that strong. Like, he's an awesome powerhouse card in this deck. So my deck list doesn't include that many token producers, not as many as Sean and Andy did on their podcast video. I wanted to have more stronger utility-based creatures and less token production, but Liliana's Mastery is another one that would fit into this category that I already showed. But these are all just ways of getting numerous zombies in a turn. Dark Salvation not only gives you zombies, but you can also get rid of a big creature with a -1 to end turn, so this is another way to get around indestructible creatures. The 3 on the top there, they all have, basically give you lots of little zombies. They're good in and of themselves, and they can just get stronger. But Army of the Damned is really the big one. I would rather have some quality token generation spells opposed to a whole bunch of them that aren't that great. So these are the 5 that I'm running. There are a lot of other good zombies to consider, but these are just the 5 I chose. If you have suggestions, tell me about them in the comment section below. So one of the greatest reasons for running white is actually having more premium spot removal, like Swords to Plowshare, Anguished Unmaking, and Merciless Eviction. Those are some of my favorite spot removal cards. This is just my removal package. You'll see Fleshbag Marauder and Skin Render are both zombies and are pretty versatile, especially if you can get them out of the graveyard a few times. They can generate some good card advantage. Corrosion Grip is great. Cyclonic Rift is a blue staple card. Austere Command is nice because you can choose all the creatures converted mana cost 4 or greater, which might hit your opponent more because a lot of ours are 3 or less. So it's kind of a versatile board wipe. But a suggestion that I got recently from playing when I was playtesting is to take out white out of this deck. Because my friend was proposing, like, why am I including white? There's not that many white zombies, and over the course of the time that I've been manipulating this deck list and kind of solidifying it, I noticed that I'm only really running 10 cards in this deck that include white. And most of them were in the spot removal package here, and they could all be replaced with other options. Like, I was running Forsake the Worldly because I like the cycling aspect to it, but I replaced that with Corrosion Grip. I could replace Anguished Unmaking with something like Beast Within. Still hits any permanent. You could remove the white board wipes with any of the blue and black board wipes. Path to Exile could be replaced with like a Tragic Slip or Dismember. You know, there's so many other cards that can do are just really good removal spells in black, blue, and green. So that is something to consider. I am thinking about maybe rebuilding this into a 3-color deck later on in the week, but for now it's a 4-color deck, and I really like this particular deck list because of the mana base as well. Like, my mana base is a big reason for why I wanted to keep it 4 colors, because I already kind of perfected it from my Atraxa deck. And since then it's been a little bit improved, but I didn't have to do any work on the mana base. So I'll go over the mana base really quickly, and I'll tell you why that I like it so much. This particular deck had 9 basics, which I think is the perfect amount for a 4-color deck. I don't like going any lower than 8 basics in any given deck. Usually around 10 is kind of ideal, so I wanted to stick with that. And these are my favorite artwork on my particular lands. Like, I just love some of these lands from the older sets with the different background and such. Then you'll see that in my Shock lands and Battle for Zendikar lands and Bicycle lands, all of these have the dual land types, and they're all very good for fetching them and searching them out with Farseek, Nature's Lore, and things. So again, there isn't much I can improve on. I mean, I'm missing the white and green Bicycle land, but other than that, that's pretty much every option that you can get, besides the original duels. My one concern with the mana base, though, is that most of these are the allied color pairings, like white, green, white, blue, black, and white, blue. So the white, black, and the black, green are probably the most important ones in this list, because they're a little harder to fetch for. If they end up in your graveyard and you don't have a way of fetching for it, sometimes you can get a little bit stuck. Typically, if you're searching out a land in the beginning of the game, you want to find green, because green enables you to find other land types easier. So green is kind of the more important one in the deck. White's probably the least important, so I would say find green first, then try to find blue and black, because that helps you draw cards and do other things, and then white at the end, because that's just your spot removal and board wipes. So yeah, that's just kind of my advice for land base. To complement the dual lands that I'm running with the 2 different land types, I'm running the 6 buddy lands, because they typically come into play untapped. I've never had an experience where they do come into play tapped, but I have only played this deck 5 or so times. However, this is almost identical mana base that I took from Atraxa, so I can't expect it to be much different from all my experience playing that deck. Cabal Coffers and Urborg are really good with Thrasios, because Thrasios has a mana sink ability. If you ever have so much mana and you don't have enough cards to do with it, then Thrasios is a good way of just throwing mana in. Keep scrying, keep digging through your deck until you get the cards you need. So that's another big reason I like Thrasios. these are the 5 that I have, and Crows and Verge is really good. These are some of the budget ones from Mirage. I just really like this land base. I don't really know any other way to improve it. You know, adding in the other fetch land would make this exactly 40 lands, and that would be kind of the best situation, but then you have to figure out what else to take out. So this is my land base. So now that you've seen the entire deck list, I'm just going to give you a whole bunch of suggestions for other cards to consider, some other things to think about. I tried to mostly choose the ones that didn't include white, just in case you only wanted to go Sultai colors, but these are just a handful of cards that I had in my collection that I think are equally as good in this sort of deck. Some of them can give you tokens by discarding cards. Rooftop Storm I really liked, but I found it a little slow for this particular iteration. Because all my zombies are less than 6 casting cost, by the time I got Rooftop Storm out on the battlefield, I already had emptied my hand of all my zombies. So I think Rooftop Storm is better as a combo piece with Grimrin. Necromancer's Covenant is a good way to get lots of zombies, and also exile a target player's graveyard, so it's a good graveyard hate card. Nocturious Gowl is really nice if you play something like Army of the Damned and bring a whole bunch of zombies into play, and then you can just kill everything else. Unfulfilled Desires is a really interesting looting effect that you can use multiple times in a turn, so it's a really effective way to dig through the deck fast. That might actually be a good way of upgrading this deck. And another reason I want to take white out of this deck now is to enable me to fill in those extra 10 cards that I'll take out with other cards like these that can maybe enhance the deck in some way. Rite of Replication is a great way of just copying one of your zombies, especially one of your zombie lords that you can get 5 copies of it out of nowhere. That will do a lot of work for you. Prize Amalgam is a card that can just recur out of the graveyard numerous times. Another one to consider is Allurin, even if it's not here. If you focus more on the 3 casting cost or less zombies, that'd be really good. Crown of Convergence is something that was recommended to me earlier this week. It's a really cool card. As long as you put the top card of your library revealed, and as long as that's a creature that shares a color with the other creatures you control, they all get +1/+1, and then it has kind of a scry ability attached to it where you can pay green and white to put that card to the bottom of your library, and that's something I think would fit in this deck really nice. Door of Destiny is a great card for any tribal deck. Architect of Imagination is a good way to flip the tables on your opponent. If all your creatures gain flying and they lose all their flying, that's really good. This was actually a card to consider for taking Aldrich out, if you took white out of the picture. Gisa and Giraffe, puts cards in your graveyard and lets you cast zombies from your graveyard, so that actually would be really good with Rooftop Storm as well. Wonder, if you play Jared's Orders, you can often search out Wonder, put into your graveyard, and then put another zombie in your hand. The Sanctitarium makes each player draw a card and discard a card. This is just a nice way of bit of group hug and just kind of works with the synergy of your deck. Same with the Drownyard. Gravedigger classic. I just like the old artwork. This Leech is really interesting because Monarch is a really fun ability for Commander, and if you put this in the field, you become the Monarch and force a player to sacrifice a creature immediately. This kind of acts as like a second Fleshbag Marauder, but it draws you a card at the end of your turn. Although the only danger to this is you should have consistent ways to keep yourself as the Monarch or get it back. So if you're playing against a lot of really creature-heavy decks and you're not able to keep the Monarch, then this may not be the right choice for you. And this Drake is another really efficient flyer, similar to the Ruinator. I have so many cards to suggest, so many in my collection that could go in here. I was trying to work out of 150 cards and being what 99 am I going to run, or 98 I guess, because I'm running the partner commanders. But there you have it. That is my deck. These are some helpful suggestions. What are your thoughts? Leave comments in the comment section below. Love to hear back from you. Have a good week.